This is the E-Free Lethbridge Podcast. Welcome to the E-Free Lethbridge Podcast. It's so great to have you with us today. I'm your host, Levi Fraser. It's the week of April 26th to May 2nd. Joining us, we've got the service pastor for the 9 a.m., the 11 a.m. service, the most community-minded person I know, Mark Dick.
Hello, friends.
We also got the Young at Heart, the service pastor for the 6 p.m. service, Luke Watson.
Greetings.
Luke Watson.
And Wonder Woman extraordinaire, Glenda Postman.
Wonder Woman.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to get gold cuffs. I'm going to get gold cuffs, you guys. It's going to be great. Or John.
That's awesome.
Like I said, it's so great that you're joining us. We're so happy with the people who've been tuning in. Continue to follow along with us. But let's get to our fun morning question. So today's fun morning question, what is one weird thing that you have just lying around the house? Can you guys describe one weird thing that you've got?
Oh, based on the head that Glenda brought up on Sunday morning there yesterday at the church.
That is very weird. There are other weird things. We will show other weird things, but the head, super weird.
I decided to, I got this. This is a Dr. Phil mask. And if you can't see it because you're listening, basically I was at a seniors event from our church, and they did this interview with Dr. Phil as a little bit of a skit, and Ruthie and I were just dying laughing. And after they finished, I'm like, can we please have that mask? So they gave us this Dr. Phil mask, and it sits in our closet, and we do a lot of scares with this mask.
That's great.
We bring people over for dinner, whatever it is. One of us will, never mind. I can't give away my secrets here.
Yeah, don't.
Can't.
Stop right there.
It's like a hockey mask with tape on it, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks for describing, Glenda. Yeah, it's one of those road hockey,
it's more
hacky
freaky
masks.
on the other side.
Yeah.
It's scary.
It's like a Freddy mask.
And then just
Freddy
a Dr.
mask.
Phil picture posted on the front.
You know what? You could wear one.
Weird eyes.
Instead of like
weird dark eyes.
Instead of eyes that are like actually shaped like an eye, it's just a circle.
Yeah.
A dime-sized circle. Oh man, those are awesome.
Oh man, Glenda, what do you got?
Well, this is back in the day. Like, I raised my kids in the 90s. Yeah, in the 90s. And so we did different things back in the day. We weren't very sensitive about certain things. And so I found this. It is a rubber knife. These are the toys, and it's very rubbery. Like, it will not hurt you. It's not hard at all. But these are the toys we gave our children so they could pretend stab each other.
What age did you give that to your kids, Glenda?
I think 3. I think Noah got this when he was 3.
3
Wow.
He loved it, and yeah, we had a sword too. I think we still have the sword. And so these are the things. I don't know if you can still buy this at Toys R Us.
Yeah,
I'm
That's why
guessing
you
no.
got to keep it.
Yeah, I gotta keep it. I will pass this down to his child. His rubber.
Yeah, from generation to generation, you shall pass things down.
Yeah, it's great.
That's good. Well, I have a Russian nesting doll. You can't see it if you're watching, but this is sweet. It actually is legit nesting, many nesting things.
How many nestings? You got to keep going.
Oh, I don't know. There's like a lot in here. I got a couple more.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Look how small it's going.
No.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's like a
So there's
peanut.
like
What do you do with that? Do you have to dust all the layers when it's your turn to dust?
No, see, if you don't open it, it doesn't need dusting. So it just sits on the
If you
TV.
don't open it, it doesn't need dusting.
Yeah, if you
That's
don't
right,
open
see?
So you may not use the nesting dolls to nest.
No.
No,
But
they're-
my wife, it's a weird thing, but it's like a souvenir that she brought from her travels in Europe. So everybody needs a Russian nesting doll.
They do, yeah.
Do you think Bonnie will be offended that we're calling it weird?
You know what? I'm not sure she's going to watch it.
Of
But we'll
course
see.
she would. Why
Yeah.
would she not watch it?
You know what? She does watch it, a little pieces of it, and giggles at us, with us. If I tell her that I spoke of her in this, she will watch it.
Yeah. Okay. We should all
I
say.
think you should take the littlest doll out of there and then put a candy in there every once in a while, just so that when someone does go to open it, they find a little treat inside.
Yes, it's like a reward for playing with the nesting dolls.
Yes.
Or nobody does for a long time, and then I open it and the candy is like rotten.
Rock hard.
Yeah, rock hard candy.
Put an egg in it.
Oh,
nothing could possibly go wrong with this idea.
No.
Levi, what do you got?
Okay, so I don't know, a few years ago we were going through Jordana's grandparents' house. They had moved her into a home, and so we were just trying to like figure out where all the items were gonna go, and there was this lovely buffalo. It was like, I think it was on the fireplace mantle. It was so cool.
I was treasured.
On the fireplace. Wow.
It's and what is that even called? Anatomically correct?
Yeah.
Anatomically. Yeah. So it is a completely correct replica of a little buffalo that sits in our living room.
Wow.
Oh gosh.
And
definitely anatomically correct.
It is definitely correct. Anyways, my son loves to try and play with this, but the horns are actually very sharp and like pointy. So it's like rock hard. It's not like soft. So it is definitely an ornament, but I feel like people do comment on this buffalo when they come to our house. Like,
I hope you keep it on your fireplace as it's meant to be there.
Well,
center stage.
Yeah, we have a fireplace downstairs in our house, but we have it on a nice display shelf upstairs. Okay. That's out of reach from our son, but in clear view.
Enjoyment for others to see the anatomically correct buffalo.
The anatomically correct buffalo.
We should stop talking about that.
Yeah. Well, I think that sums everything up. It's time to get to the message.
It is time.
Okay, this week we had a message from Pastor Jeff, and he went over the I am statement, I am the bread of life. That comes from the verse, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And so today I kind of wanted to talk about this sustenance that God gives us. Mm-hmm. And so my first question for you guys, how has God sustained you? Both in the past, but also currently, how is God sustaining you right now?
I'll jump in. I think that presence through Scripture. I think I love reading different parts. I'm not a from front to back reader as much as I like the stories, the individual story pieces of people's lives. And as you move through the Israelite story, through the Old Testament into the New Testament, Jesus' story, and then the disciples, and that sort of the stories that are shared, I think there's always this continued, we talked about it, even Jeff mentioned it this week again, but the fact that in the beginning, God talks about being the I am in Exodus. He speaks about it again in Jesus' life, and then again in Revelation. But this presence of God, this story, this continued story of the presence of God showing up. And I think that it's been a good reminder over the last year of looking back to see the presence of God in my story. So even now in a time when feeling alone or feeling isolated or feeling distant from people or even now, I could say that God has, in this part of my story, sustained it with his presence. Does that? I think that would be my this story, the reminder of God's presence in the story of the Bible, this narrative of the Scripture into the story woven through that. I hope that one day I can write my story and see again the presence of God woven through that.
So I think one of the things that reminds me is it was about a year ago that I was diagnosed with cancer. And I think in that time, everything in a diagnosis like that pulls you into what's to come. So, I mean, you look up survival rates. What are they going to do? How are they going to do it? And it just kept pulling me into the future and the things that I didn't want to lose and that I was kind of clinging on to, which I don't think are bad to want to love and enjoy. But it brought fear into my mind. And so then I think at that point, I was reminded that Jesus says to us, he will sustain us each and every day. And the idea of this bread of life, like this simple thing that he said, I mean, we get this picture when he supplied manna for his people, but every day I will send that bread. So I think we all want to know that someone is coming for us and going to rescue us. It's not good for man to be alone. We want to know those things, but we have to remind ourselves that in the day to day. So for me in cancer and again in COVID, it was like, but do I trust you to be enough for me today? Mm. And I look back on the history of his faithfulness and say, yes. So I just have to remind myself to not be pulled into the future, but look at what the piece I have in my hand right now, which is, I actually believe you're enough for me.
Yeah, that's really good, Glenda. I would say I'm almost like what you and Mark said, like in between there with God being present today. One of the life verses that I've had this past year was, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Today has enough worry on its own. And I think as I was thinking about how God sustains me, I was reminded of my move to Lethbridge, actually. Like, people love to kind of ask you the question, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Right? And now every time I'm asked that question, I'm like, man, when I was like 26 years old, if you asked me a year before that, if I'd ever consider moving to Lethbridge, Alberta, I would say not a chance. I would laugh at you. And look where I am now. So God just kind of brought me back to that story where it's like, I got a plan. I will guide you. I will be with you. And so he kind of brought me back to the presence that he is here. He is at work. Just focus on that today. Because everybody always wants to pull us in the future. What's going to happen? And the reality is we don't have tomorrow. You know, we're not guaranteed that.
Yeah. I think for me, specifically in the past, so when I was younger, when I was in middle school, I was sexually assaulted. Which I think all of you guys know that. I don't know if all the listeners will know that, but after that, I really was wrestling with my sexuality and wrestling with my faith. Like, who is God in the midst of this? Who is God in the midst of my struggling with how I viewed sexuality? And I remember the song "Lord, I Need You" came out when I was in Bible college, and there's a line in there, "You're my one defense," and that really, I don't know, rang true for me. I really cling to that, and that's how God has provided for me, that he's my one defense. In the midst of everything, I am able to cling to him, and he will defend me because I know that I'm his child. Like, he's right there for me. And so I feel like that's how he has sustained me and continues to sustain me. I can still rely on him for that.
You know, I remember watching this movie that was really dramatic. It was, I think, Liam Neeson. I don't even know. But this guy was dying, and I think it was Liam Neeson, or the guy standing over him, and he kept like looking around and being like, "What's happening here? What's happening here?" And the guy just kept saying, "Look at me." And the person who was sick looked the other way, and he's like, "Just look at me. Just look at me." And so sometimes I think that's what God is saying to me, like, just look at me. Again and again, look at me. And I think too, even in this passage that we talked about this week about the bread of life, he's like, "I'm the bread of life. I will sustain you." And they moved away grumbling. So they're like, "I'm going to grumble about this, grumble about that." But and what he's saying again is, look at me. Like, I am enough. I will sustain you. This is who I am. So that reminds me of that movie.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just like that. What you just said, the "I am enough" piece, or like the "look at me." Even like today, or in our lives, we like fill our lives with other things that we imagine will sustain, right? Whatever that happens to be. I think you can pick things, specific things, but we can also like busy or work or the things that we believe are going to sustain a relationship or whatever the things are that we're going to sustain, that in the end don't do it either, right? So I think that that's like a beautiful reminder like this, even this passage of, you know, this sustaining nature of the living bread, like this bread we celebrated it with communion, which was a cool
That's great. Yeah.
This like this sustaining nature that only Jesus can sustain us that way, right? Like and even, I mean, today we've in, you know, this COVID time or whatever, lots of our things that we've held on to have been stripped away, but we, you know, we still can be we're reminded this weekend of the sustaining nature of God, of Jesus, and that's what he can offer. So
I think it's just like hard sometimes to like stay in the moment, to stay in the here and now. It's hard to keep our minds there. So I don't know, what are some ways that you guys are trying to keep your mind there? Like one of the practices I've been trying to instill is not just in gratitude, because I think gratitude is the thing that lots of researchers or people will tell us that keeps us in the here and now, but also lament. So I think to sit in like, so daily I've been writing like, what's one piece of sorrow? Because I think ignoring that, I think he's saying, what else? So I'll say, I don't know, God, like, I'm not sure about this. What else? What else? And so I feel like he's asking me to say, what are the pieces? And then that allows me to lay them down and then to put in some pieces of gratitude. And this is where I see your hand. That helps me to stay like in the here and now and stay in with God and be able to look at him. Like what's helpful to you guys?
Good. Kind of, that's interesting that you say that a lot of research that Thanksgiving keeps you in the here and now. I mean, I'm reminded that Philippians says, don't be anxious about anything, but with everything, prayer and petition, and with thanksgiving.
Make your request to God. So it means that we do get to request too. Yeah.
So Glendar, do you journal? Is that like a write down so you can see, or is that just like a mental, like mindfulness? How do you do that so that you can like record, or do you not?
Yeah, I record my thoughts, and I try also not to leave them there, because the other thing that helps us is pulling people into connectedness. And, you know, after you just have a really good, I mean, we can be connected to people and hear people and listen, but then there's times where we really feel like we're heard and listened and known and understood. So a lot of that too is just sharing. I think with other people, this was the hard piece. I mean, even us as friends, we do that with each other. This was really hard, and this is where I saw God's hand. We do it naturally in lots of ways, so it's being conscious of it.
Cool. Yeah, I think even just, I remember we were talking about the hockey team with this just after they lost one of their teammates, and it was just giving permission to grieve, because in the hockey dressing room, you toughen up, top up your lip, right? You shut down. It's like, guys, you got to express this. You got to grieve. So giving ourselves permission to do that. And I love that you said, Glenda, just being heard. Like, I feel like we get more tense and stressed and anxious when we don't feel understood or we don't feel heard. So we have somebody to listen to us and they can say like, man, I feel that too, or I sense that too. It just kind of move us forward in that process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And you know, if we don't mention those losses, then what happens is I think we stockpile them in our brain, and we say, God, you actually didn't show up for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just leaks in a whole bunch of other areas, and our minds keep a record of that. So we have to say to God, I don't know where you are in this. And if not, we just stockpile the losses.
Yeah. So this past Sunday, Jeff mentioned in the message one of our direction statements. The direction statement says, we want to teach and model how to fully love God and others by living simpler and less busy lives. And this is a call not just for our staff, but for our whole church family. This is a call for everyone, that we should be living simpler and less busy lives. And so I want to know for you guys, how have you guys been doing that in the midst of COVID season? And, you know, like he mentioned that when we get back into things, are there things that we want to cut out? So are there things that you want to cut out of your lives to live more simply, a little bit less busy, and really in a way that clings to God as provider?
You know, Levi, I still think that with living less busy, I feel like I know it's been almost 2 months now, but I'm still trying to figure out of it seems like there still is a bit of busyness, go, 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 go. But I think for me, not being like, there's like the legs at the church, I guess, where you're like deeper now in young adults, is it's a you know, an hour-ish, maybe an hour online, not setting up at the church, you're not taking down chairs. So I think there's that opportunity for me in between busyness where I could be more present with, you know, the family a little bit, which I have definitely appreciated that. I think I've put Paisley to bed at least 6 days a week, you know, and I've loved that. Yeah, and that's something that I want to try. I mean, obviously going back to work, it's not always an option, but I don't know. It's been good. Really
cool.
I think there's like less busy. We have 3 sons that are active in sports and athletics, and we coach and doing all those sort of things. So there's like a natural less busy of like running around things. It's busier. It seems like it's busier because now we are teachers as well in our house, because our kids then are doing school and the things at our house. So you're trying to like encourage them to like be healthy and do good things, as well as, you know, play outside and do school and those sort of things. So I think that has like naturally been like less busy evenings. And so, and even like just the running around pieces. But I think I actually struggle with the what are you not going to do or bring back when everything starts, because I think there'll be like a natural we won't be able to do certain things, but I like think that it's going to be so different that I'm not yet willing to say I'm not doing these things. Does that mean like, because I think there's something to bring back some of the things that are like good things, and naturally we won't be able to do all the things. So I'm not sure about the things that I'm not going to do, because I feel like when we were doing them, they were like the right things. Right. So there'll be natural things that we won't be able to do, but there's some things that I'd actually like to bring back to do that are pieces of, maybe it's because of who I am, but maybe it's just because of, I don't know, the situation. That I'm just curious what they're going to be. I'm not willing to plant a flag yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that this has been like a reminder to me what it means to pay attention to what's right before me, like the pieces. And so that time's been a gift to me too, to focus on what's right before me. And some of that is not just the people I live with, which is one person, but and my kids, but really to the other things that are before me in prayer or in time with God. I think there's something about this that has like leveled the playing field for all of us. That's really, it is a shared struggle that we're all in. And I think there's something about that is just a really good recognizing of that. And really, we always have that. We always have very similar shared struggles, but we're not always willing to talk about them. So I think the invitation to talk about them maybe is something that I want to keep, I think is important. And I think not to pick back up, I think we have unique roles, and lots of people do. That means that we bear a lot of burdens alone. Just and things that like other people ask us to pray for, or that we're thinking about, or we're praying. So those pieces that we bear a little bit alone, it's I don't want to pick that up. I don't want to, and it doesn't mean I don't want to bear the burdens. I do, and I want to pray, but it's just a reminder that I don't bear them alone. Like I really rely on God, what that reliance looks like, and yeah, to have the understanding that we really all bear burdens. So I think something around that I haven't quite formulated in my mind, but
I feel like obviously just going for a walk, like we have a thing in our house where we go for a walk with our dogs every evening now. And so
nice.
Like I still, to be completely honest, in the evening I'm like, oh, I don't want to go for the walk. But like to have that like scheduled in there. Like that's not how I would have lived before this. Like it's definitely a little bit more simple. It's less busy. There's room for that. And I don't know if I'd want to give that up in the future. But I think even like ministry wise, I look at, so I'm the director of high school ministry. And so I also lead a small group for high school boys. And our small group, we're probably online in our small group from around 7 till maybe 8:30 tops. Maybe it's 8 o'clock, which is less time than our youth would usually run for. It's definitely more simple. It's a simpler model of small groups, but the conversation is just so rich. And I don't know if I'd want to lose that. You know, I don't know if I'd want to make it more crazy and busy and lose out on the great conversation that we're having, the honest meeting together. And so, yeah, I don't know. There's definitely benefits to living less simply. No, more simply, less busy. That's the right words. Yeah.
Do you think, Levi, that like you're able to have that kind of honesty because there's some distractions removed, or why do you think you can have? Because I think in ways there is a kind of honesty too, and I was thinking that it was mostly because we are in similar situations. The playing field's a little bit more level, and we just don't have some of the barriers, which is like, what is it? People evaluating the way I look or how I'm expressing myself. So I wonder if some of those things have fallen away.
Yeah, I think there is barriers that are down. And also, like you said, we're all on the same level. We're all having a unified experience. And so we're able to talk about how this is affecting us in different ways. And we all feel like because we're all going through the same thing, we're able to talk about that in a deep way, which has led to people talking about other things that they're going through in a deep way, because that's the space to do it. So yeah, I don't know. I do think that we wouldn't have got there though unless we were forced to live more simply. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So,
and probably more present too, right? Like in the here and the now, we're not thinking so far ahead. So even a daily walk, really that's good for the soul because it's a call back to the present too. So it's interesting.
Call back to the present, yeah.
So on Sunday, we were also given the opportunity to do both communion, and we also got to witness a baptism. Two of the main sacraments that we do as a church family. And so what is the importance to clinging to these sacraments, even if they have to be done in a unique way during this season?
Unprecedented baptism for an unprecedented time. I think for me, Levi, it's like God's not finished working, you know, and these things help us, these sacraments, these baptism, communion, they help draw our attention back to what God has done on the cross, and that baptism, that God is working, that Jesus is still changing lives, and we need that reminder.
It feels significant too that like we often pass the bread and pass the cup like from one another, so it's like this shared time and experience, which I think is interesting. And I think we need contact with our community of worship, and that's the way that we're fed the bread of life oftentimes too. So we the family of our faith will tell us and remind us of the story that we believe, that these days are determined by Jesus, not by a pandemic. And so I think we just need those reminders. They're practical and rich.
That's good. I like it. I love doing communion with our kids in the basement. It's kind of fun watching the service, and it's always a bit unique, and the questions are always a little bit different, and the reminders are good and healthy, and it's not the same. So a variety it keeps the kids engaged in a different way as well. But I mean, the connection this week, of course, it worked well to have the bread of life and celebrating communion at the same time was obviously super significant. Yeah. The baptism fun, splash, or whatever you want to call it, was kind of fun. And I think I actually already had people contact regarding, more conversation about that. What can that actually look like? Can we actually do that? What about if I wanted to be baptized? How can we make something like that work? So always, I think, or not, I won't say always, seems like that's really extreme, but so often the testimony of other people, the witness of God working in people's lives, encourages us to think about how God is working in our life. So
For sure.
baptism, without him sharing his whole testimony, we know
Right, yeah.
the witness of his baptism is testimony to God working. Done. You don't climb into your tank top and get somebody to pour a bucket of cold water on you just because it's fun, unless you're doing some sort of challenge. But this was like testimony to God working. This is what I need to do, which is always an encourament to recognizing that God is working in our life and asking what he's doing in our life. So I love those. The baptism for me is like just a cool sharing of testimony, a cool sharing of what God is doing. And it's unique. It's not just somebody talking, it's somebody acting. I don't know.
And there's no barriers to that. I love that about this piece. There's like no barriers. Like what? Why
exactly.
We're isolated? Okay, like throw the water on me. He's just running towards it. Like I want this. I want to do this. No barriers. It's great.
Yeah, and that was like stretching for me too, in a good way. That like I think we've become so structured. This is the way it happens. And the verse that we kept going back to was I think Philip in the eunuch, where the guy just said, "There's what's preventing you from baptizing you right now?" And there's nothing. And I just think I need that shakeup. I think our church needs that shakeup. Just that the reminder, there isn't just this, everything has to happen this way, structured like this. It's like, yeah. So that was a good
Awesome.
to experience that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think like it's cool to hold tightly to these traditions in the season that like that we're in right now. Yeah, we can't do things in person at the church, but that doesn't mean that we all of a sudden throw all these traditions that we hold tightly to as a family that do bring us to meeting with God, being in his presence. And so I think it's great to do that. My family, we've been the last 2 Sundays, and I think moving forward, we're going to do this where we do like a brunch or breakfast and we watch the service together. Like we literally put it on the table while we're like eating. So 2 weeks ago, I made pancakes. This week we had like some egg casserole thing that Jordana made. And it's cool because this Sunday when we were doing communion, it brought me back to when Jesus was actually eating with his disciples and just I don't know, it put like it was a new view on breaking bread together. Like it wasn't specifically bread that we were eating, but just that sustenance, like that we're sitting down, we're in community, and we're reflecting on who Jesus is and the sacrifice he made for us. And so, it was just a new view, but I was really happy to still hold to this tradition.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, thank you so much for the ways that you poured your hearts out in this conversation. It's time to move to On the Lighter Side.
On the lighter side.
Lighter side.
Okay, so today's On the Lighter Side conversation, I've got this question for you guys. What has it meant to be a good friend during COVID, or what are some ways that we can be a good friend during this COVID season?
Yeah, Lee, going with what Glenda said, I think for some reason we think that we have to explain things or fix things. And I think being a good friend, just listening to your friends, just listening to people, as you said earlier, Glenda, that's huge. I know it's the lighter side. So I think laughing and telling funny stories is always a good way to be a friend.
It is such a great way to be a friend.
Just to laugh. A cheerful heart is good medicine. Proverbs. Shave your head.
I would say too, like to have conversation, I think is really important too. That is and I'm not saying this because I think I do this, I'm saying this because I get to receive this, is like really genuine, like open and honest and not filtered through a million things, but just true. And I think that's helpful. And I not complaining. I think there's a difference between like sharing our sorrows and grumbling, I think. And so I think grumbling often turns into the critique or criticism of something else. So I don't want to just talk about, what do I think about this person doing this thing, or the decisions people are making, or like I'm trying to stay away from those kinds of things. But to really say, this is me in this space and this is how this feels, I think feels really more significant to me. So I think that's helpful. Also, I had friends who dropped off cookies the other night at like 10 p.m. It was the best. So little people doing little acts of kindness really come out as big acts of kindness.
Absolutely.
Great.
When you say little people doing little, were the people that dropped it off small?
They're not very tall people. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, good. I would say the same, just engaging in real conversation, phoning friends, Zooming. We live in Coaldale, and so we ride our bikes around, and like one of the kids runs up to the door and rings a doorbell and runs back to the sidewalk. And we've had lots of conversation with friends just sitting on their curb. You know, we'll stay on our bikes and they'll sit on the grass and we'll have our conversation for 20 minutes and ride on. I think there's just like a realizing that we are still real people that need to see real people's faces. And so even for us, having people, I think as a family, or like seeing our friends, and we fortunately have some friends that live closer, so we can like on bikes or walking, we can get to their homes and sort of stand like that at this distance sort of and watch or talk. But those checking in, I've had lots of people sort of just send a text or check in like that. Like remembering that we're, again, I think earlier, Glenda, you talked about leveling the playing field, but we're in this to get, like, we actually, as humanity, are experiencing something together. I got a text from a friend in Panama who told me the same thing. We're locked in. It's actually like really locked in there, but you know, this same experience, what is it? What are we experiencing? And so to be able to, like, you know, check in with people, realizing that they're at the same, they're locked in with their kids or with their family or you know, those sort of things. And so just to have real conversations, I like it. I like laugh. So laughing, you know, at the blunders that we make together, and the mistakes that we do, and just the fun things that happen in our regular day. Those are important. But
the best part is you're home. Like, you're home.
Right.
People get like, when else could you ring someone's doorbell? But people are like, hey, you got time for a call? I'm like, yeah, I pretty much got time for nothing else.
Much. Yeah.
You name it.
That's fun.
The phone a friend.
Phone a friend.
Yeah.
Where's that from? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? But I think too, just to add to that, Mark, I think it's easy to maybe text and stuff. And I don't know. I think the phone call is just, it's important. We need to be using the phone.
Yeah.
Hearing a voice and having a conversation. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
I think there's something to this committedness. Like, if you had relationships that you were meeting regularly once a week with those people, continue doing it. Like, yes, we're locked inside. You can't meet in person. We all know that. That doesn't mean you can't continue doing things. We figured out a way to watch Survivor every week with our family friends that we do always. And we have good conversation. We pause during commercials. We're still able to do that.
That's awesome.
And so continue those relationships. Don't just let them end because, you're locked inside. But I think that's what has, I don't know, kept us going. I like Glenda's thing about the cookies dropping off. We also had friends that dropped off a pandemic gift. Like, that's what they called it, just like a pandemic gift. And so it was great. It was like bread and jam that they had made, and oh man,
Nice.
so good.
So fun.
Sometimes we just see kindness and goodness everywhere. And I think this is one of the times people are hungry for it and looking for it and noticing it. And that is just so great to see.
Yeah. Sweet.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's all we got for today's show. Keep following with us. We love having you. But that's everything we got. Talk to you later.
Awesome. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.